Through the Mayhem, the Site Lead podcast series, bringing marketing industry leaders together to discuss the ever-shifting media landscape. Learn about the ins and outs of real-time marketing, influencers, data privacy, technology, and so much more. All from industry experts with real experience, giving you the real answers. Now, let's break through the mayhem.
Welcome back to Breaking Through the Mayhem for another really exciting episode with a friend of mine named Christina Goswiller. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I work at Digitas currently. I head up our social transformation team over there, but have really a mixed bag of experience. I've been startup side, in-house at different brands, agencies, other places. I think where I'm at today is really this convergence of social, brand, content, creator. It's been this kind of emerging space now for, 10, 15 years, but I think ultimately we're seeing it have a bigger and bigger influence on CMOs, CEOs. It is top of mind, and that's super exciting. So excited to be here and talk about all that.
It's awesome. I mean, you're living in a world now where everybody cares, obviously, about this intersection
Yeah,
of brand, culture, content, right? And I'm
absolutely.
sure you're living being asked so many different questions about this every day. What do you think are like the most experiential things that you've done that have helped shape the way you think about this?
Mhm.
And where do you kind of consider social's role today in your business and in business in general?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, something that I've observed increasingly is that social teams in particular, we used to be this kind of like thing that was, at the bottom of the conveyor belt, right? Like strategy was set by brand people, and then it went to media people, then creatives, and we were kind of along for the ride at the end to provide insight as to, the platforms and whatever else, formats, specs, all of that good stuff. And I think one of the like biggest paradigm shifts that has happened and that, should have happened a while ago is that social is now an input into all of that because it is kind of the epicenter of culture, right? Like that is where new music is being shaped, fashion, style, I mean, you name it, right? And so social has become this critical source of intelligence that ultimately should be inspiring brand, media, creative, all of the other things in our kind of ecosystem. And, I think the clients that really live and breathe that are excelling as a result. They're relevant. They are staying attuned to what consumers, communities care about. And that's, ultimately, like, again, the key to success.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm always so interested in talking with the amazing team over at Digitas because you guys, this is what you live by,
Yeah.
right? And you guys think about speed of culture, putting brands in the right place at the right time. And you've always been about speed.
Yes.
And obviously there's this thing called SWOT, right? That you
Yep.
kinda you see out there and, you're doing a lot with this AI and social intelligence world, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
How is obviously that annoying question I'm sure you got a lot, like, how is AI changing now how you're thinking about brands uncovering and acting on these cultural insights?
Yeah. I mean, it's really, I think, just like accelerating everything we're doing. We at the moment are really trying to leverage partners and platforms to aggregate, the best data sources in the world that help us better understand culture and our consumers and different categories, et cetera, and aggregate that in a way where we can, more quickly discover, trends that are hyper relevant to your category, your community, et cetera. So it's really just kind of supercharging what we're already doing, and all of that again is powering our ability to be a critical input into any brief. We've got, a whole suite these days of AI agents that are designed to help us, uncover new trends, better understand what's popping with Gen Z and whatever else. We've got plenty of people who know that inside and out. It's more just, again, like getting to some of those answers a bit faster.
So cool. I mean, you guys have always been forward thinking, playing with agents, being ahead. But it still seems no matter how ahead you are that brands seem to struggle to act on this data.
Yeah.
What do you think separates the companies that can turn this insight into impact from those that don't?
Yeah, I think it's really about buying into this idea that, social is no longer just a channel. It is, again, like a source of inspiration for anything and everything. And, some of our clients have really embraced this, have, you know, shaken up the way that they structure teams as a result. So more kind of like hybrid skill sets, that they're hiring and looking for, but then, breaking up some of these kind of traditional structures of strategy, creative, media, whatever, in service of bringing together the right skill sets and people who are inherently curious and excited about, what their fans, the brand's fans, consumers care about ultimately, and using that as, again, like the impetus for, partnerships, really any decision, any experience. And I think it, again, like comes down to like living and breathing that in a way that, not everybody's maybe ready to do or is starting to kind of embrace fully.
I mean, it's so fascinating to watch, and I feel like with your mindset and the way you guys think, you've been sitting at the center of this for a while.
Yeah,
But as you start to like think about search and discovery, they're shifting obviously really fast
absolutely.
and towards especially social, but other formats of seeing where a brand shows up.
Right.
Like, how would you start to help? Like, and I was thinking about this earlier, how to ask you this, and I've been trying to play around with it, but like, how do you think about educating brands in today's world? Like, you're obviously a subject matter expert on this, and you want them to think like you think. What do you do when it comes to education?
Yeah, I mean, I think one source of education that we currently provide, which is, I think, simultaneously fun and insightful, is we provide what we call a SWOT culture briefing to brands. And I think traditionally, that might have been something that like a social media marketer alone would be leveraging as like, all right, these are the, trends, memes I need to be on top of and, inspiration for content specifically for social. And it's like, no, like that is, you know, gold that should be inspiring your next big like 360, tentpole campaign or whatever it is. So I think the more that like people of all levels at all levels can become familiarized with that type of, information and inspiration, like that is where it's at. And so that is, I think, increasingly a tool that like we're seeing used and seeing as, something that is helpful to C-suite all the way down. Um, and then, I think beyond that too, like really trying to center a lot of the kind of, expertise we provide, like reframing it to CMOs, CEOs, et cetera, in a way where it's like, ultimately, how can your brand provide more value to like your consumer, right? Like in the era of this new era of discovery, like your job is to provide better answers to people and your brand is part of that answer. And I think like with that as a North Star, like the rest of it kinda makes sense and falls into place a little bit in my mind?
Brilliant. Yeah, coming out of this, I'm gonna just start winning everywhere with that storyline. Come on, Adam, what like, you really had to take my pitch?
Yeah.
That's it's really smart because ultimately, right, every interaction that brands have today is looked at, monitored, and thought about, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's, it's crazy, like, sometimes I always think about, what I'm gonna post somewhere,
Mhm.
and I have such a bad read sometimes on what's gonna actually land and what's not, so it's always interesting to, like, pay attention to, the sentiment or the relevance or
Yeah.
who the audience is today, right?
Right, right.
Speaking of that, what made me wanna interview in the first place outside of, like, being cool is I just saw that you were named a top 50 innovator in the creator economy for
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Like, how do you go from, like, a D1 college athlete to that, and what do you think how do you think that played out? Your obviously, your competitive spirit
Yes. Yeah.
or what that means to you, but, like, tell us a little bit more about you, like, you're winning all these awards, you you're staying humble, you're staying moving. Like, what inspires you to do all that, and how does that typically happen?
Yeah. I think the D1 athlete thing, like that being very much always in my bloodstream. I am very much a hustler and self-starter. And funny enough, after graduating, I was working as a paralegal. I was like very much about being a lawyer. I wanted to be like a clerk for a constitutional or for a Supreme Court justice, and like was studying constitutional law, and I was that type of nerd. It was great. But I kind of had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment working as a paralegal, and I took a part-time job at what was at the time like barely even a real company called Tribe. And it was just two co-founders who had kind of stumbled into influencer marketing. And this is circa 2012. Like, they were kind of starting to ride, the wave of all of this becoming this huge movement. And they hired me to basically do some part-time copywriting, and I parlayed that into a full-time role. Um, Quit my job as a paralegal. And just, I've been self-taught basically ever since. I was put in charge of marketing and I had no idea what the hell that meant. So I, was reading like textbooks and articles, downloading the syllabus from like, my alma mater, Stanford's graduate school business program.
I
Like,
haven't heard the word syllabus in a while.
that's a good thing. Nobody wants to hear that word.
Like,
Um,
I was the type of
yeah.
person that just showed up for the syllabus, and that was the end of
The
of
world
it.
needs both, Adam, that's the thing. No, I think and, like, that is, who I am. Like, I've always been a self-starter, and, like, once I get excited about something and I'm hungry, like, I'm gonna go figure it out. Um, and, I think, like, that was my, introduction to brand strategy, to influencer marketing, to social media, all of those things. And fast forward how many years later now, I'm in this role at Digitas where like, I'm given the opportunity to design new products and solutions and services based on that expertise. And I think, that aligns very nicely to my kind of like, you know, D1 athlete hustler mentality, but also like entrepreneurial background and spirit from, those early days at Tribe. And yeah, it feels like kind of the perfect through just like full circle moment a bit, I guess.
That's awesome. I mean, from my perspective, where first of all, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in LA in Manhattan Beach. So
Alright,
it's
so Stanford's not too
yeah,
so
I've
is
recently come back to LA too. So another kind of full circle moment.
was Stanford, like, your aspiration growing up, or did that like, is that where you wanted to end up?
It was. So as like, an athlete, that was a full-time job as a kid, even the travel ball and all those things. I always knew I wanted to, use softball to get myself to a really, really good, both athletic program as well as like academic, institution. So Stanford was kind of like the pivotal of like, you know, great, obviously like athletic program, great, kind of sports history, and then, you know, amazing school too.
I feel like you were at Stanford when Michelle Wie came
I
around.
was. She was, yeah, a frequent, flyer in the, PT room when I was in there too, like having my shoulder worked on or something. So, yeah, and Andrew Luck was another one. Lots of like high profile, some cool athletes at that time. Yeah.
I mean, because Michelle Wie really, when women's sports started to get the publicity it deserved,
Right. Right.
obviously she didn't get where she ultimately was hoping,
Yeah.
but I feel like she made a huge impact
Oh,
on
absolutely.
that because, like,
On.
there was so much spotlight I remember on her
Yep.
as a
Yep.
sports fan, and, yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's awesome that you ended up where you wanted to be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, I think, from my perspective, like, listening, obviously athlete, always competitive spirit, and then finding where you did today,
Mhm.
like, what is your typical advice for people in careers that you think about when you're talking to them?
Yeah, I think something I really benefited from, in kind of in my early days out of school working at a startup was that I had exposure to a lot of different things, like, right off the bat, and there was this kind of, like, I had to figure it out, like, I was doing, like, I was cold calling people, I was like, I, like, really, like, all manner of things, like, at one point, they were gonna get me, like, a different computer purely to, like, work with an Excel spreadsheets all day, like, like, the full gamut of things, and what I would say is, like,
You're a utility player at all
I
times.
yeah, and any opportunity that's gonna give you cross train you right off the bat, but also give you a good sense of what you like and don't like is kind of unbeatable. And also I think program you in a way where, you are able to problem solve through things that you've never done before. I think a little bit of a kind of inherent bias I have when I'm interviewing people, even now, is like, when I see that in someone, I get really excited because that is how I think, of like, say like, just hearing no isn't good enough, like, let's go figure out how to actually accomplish what we wanna accomplish and, like, be a bit scrappy, for lack of a better way of saying it, and, yeah, I think that's very much how, like, SWAT came to be of, like, we knew we needed to have, like, content creators in-house, that was kind of where it started, and nobody had done that yet, at least not at Digitas, and, there were a lot of, like, not, for any other reason than, like, legal, kind of implications and whatever else, like, there were a lot of, like, obstacles in the way, and we, as, like, a small tiger team, were like, "Nope, we're gonna figure this out."
I love that. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, when I think about where I wanna take this with you is always like, we obviously think about cultural moments, as you said earlier, and kinda how you marry these things together. What's, like, the coolest moment you wanna be a part of one day that you haven't been?
Oh, goodness. That's a great question. I think, like, maybe different answers personally and professionally. Professionally, like, definitely setting my sights on some bigger stages, like, would love to be at Cannes this year and putting that out into the universe, and thing. And I think, like, just being those events are always, like, a mixed bag of experiences, of course, but I think being around so many people who are excited and fired up about the same things is inspiring, always. I think personally, um, yeah, I'm really inspired, understandably, by what's happening in women's sports these days. And I think, being able to kind of find, again, some kind of like marriage of like my history with my expertise now. Um, I don't know, being like, on the, like, court side for, like, the Sparks one day doing whatever would be pretty damn cool. So
They actually have, a signed Caitlin Clark jersey over there as well.
amazing.
Yeah, listen, I'm all about, like, thinking like that, and it feels like with you based on your career, anything you've put your mind to, you're gonna end up, so one day we'll see you doing that. But, from my perspective, the other thing is you're obviously in LA, right? And there's a lot going on when it comes to that kind of world. So, quick question for you. I was thinking about, like, obviously where you're trying to take your career, athletics, all these different things. When was the last time you hit a baseball or a softball? That was been going through my head a lot, actually.
No, it's a great question. It has been too long is the short answer. I've started bookmarking, batting cages in the area because I feel like I'm not really ready. Like, there's this, like, anxiety of, like, I'm not gonna be good as I used to be, I know that, but, like, there's no way I'm just terrible, right?
How many years are we talking since you picked up with that?
I mean, it's been 10 plus years. Almost like, I've thrown a ball around a little bit, but, like, like, seriously gone into a batting cage and, like, tried to, like, it's been a minute,
How
so
fast were people throwing back then?
Well, the thing with softball is,
It's
like,
closer than
it's
baseball,
it's a
and
lot closer, and so, by the time, like, a softball pitcher releases the ball, because 'cause you're also, like, jumping forward, they're like,
25 feet away at like 70 miles
30 something.
an hour.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like the best pitchers were like high 60s, low 70s, and throwing rise balls, which is something that doesn't exist in baseball, and like the reaction time is negative.
I gotta look up your stats after this call. Uh,
No.
maybe I'll do it right now as we're
No, no, no.
arguing.
Well,
Any home runs I'm gonna see there or
um, what's funny? My very first at bat, I hit what ended up being a double because it hit the top of the wall in the outfield and bounced back in versus back out.
got
And
it.
I like, it might have been a bit of a metaphor in there somewhere, but,
Huh,
anyway.
I see you wore number 33. I found that.
Yes, yes, that was my number.
We'll dig into it. So I always like to ask this question to, fun people. If you can go to dinner with one person, not family, and
Yeah.
that is alive, who would it be?
So, I just finished listening to, Barbara Streisand's biography, and I have always been low-key obsessed with this woman, but having then spent 1,000 pages with her, and her, like, audiobook is she actually, like, reads it, and it's very conversational, and she's got the little, like, isms and sound effects along the way, they're very Barb. Like, I knew she was an icon, I didn't maybe even fully realize the extent to which she had impacted, I mean, every industry within entertainment, every microcosm within entertainment, and then beyond, like, the last 2 chapters of her book were about, like, she had Bill Clinton on speed dial, basically, and was, like, influencing foreign policy, So, anyway, I think she's endlessly fascinating. She lives in Malibu, so she's not that far from where I am in LA. I might just,
And and
low
she and she grew up where I grew up.
Yeah, exactly, she's a Brooklyn babe, so
So
yeah,
I happen to understand a lot about her as well,
okay.
growing up around people that would talk about her, but I actually know people that went to high school with her.
Oh, yeah, of course,
So
yeah.
it's pretty small world. Well, listen, this was fun. Hopefully hopefully you'll join us again, Christina,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
thank you everyone for listening today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm Chris, one of the producers for Sightly's Breaking Through the Mayhem podcast. We want to thank you so much for subscribing to the show. If you'd like to learn more about the guests we had on today, we included additional information about them in the show notes. Finally, if you'd like to be on the podcast, or if you know someone who'd make a great fit, you can fill out the form at sightly.com/podcast. Catch you on the next episode.